Hello again, Steven. So I ran out of time in my last video and there was more about my new camera that I wanted to talk about. So if the last video was about why I didn't choose all of the other cameras out there, this video is going to be about why I did choose the Sony a6500. So in this video, first I'm going to explain why I chose the Sony a6500 over the other Sony Alpha cameras, and then I'm going to talk about all of the issues that people have with the Sony a6500 and my thoughts on those issues. So the first comparison is between the a6400 and the a6500. A lot of people online will recommend getting the a6400 over the 6500 just because it is several years newer, but the a6400 does not have in-body image stabilization, or IBIS. I discussed in my previous video that I wanted that feature in the new camera that I got, so that was a deal breaker for me, which is why I chose the 6500 over the 6400. The next comparison is against the a7 III. It's really hard to argue that the a7 III is not a better camera than the 6500 because it really is. Every feature in the a6500 is either included or is improved upon in the a7 III, and on top of that, it's a full-frame camera. Like I said previously, the price was what really made the difference for me. So not only is the body of the a7 III more expensive than the a6500, but when you factor in lens selection, you're talking about a big jump in the price. Truth be told, I really did consider saving up the money and getting the a7 III, but in choosing the 6500, I can save money and get the body of the camera and multiple lenses while still being under the price of the Sony a7 III body alone, which in the end is why I made that decision. So I discussed the 6400, and when it was released earlier this year, a lot of people saw it as a competitor to the 6500, but what's become very apparent is that the 6400 was an upgrade to the 6300. And then last month, Sony announced the upgrade for the 6500, which is the Sony a6600. And while the 6600 is an improvement, again, price. The 6600 improved in a couple of different ways. The biggest change was they put a bigger battery in the 6600 than the 6500 has, so they improved the battery life. In addition to that, just like the 6400, they improved the processor, the autofocus, and the color science in the camera. Also, the 6600 has a flip-up screen so that you can see yourself when you're trying to take the video, which they also featured in the 6400. But despite there only being a short list of improvements in the camera, they priced up the 6600 $200 over the 6500 at $1,400. So on paper, that's only a $200 price difference between the two cameras, but considering the 6500 is several years older than the 6600, you can get plenty of deals on a used 6500 online. I got my camera on eBay, a refurbished model with absolutely no blemishes and in perfect working order, for $700. So when considering between the two cameras, I had to think about, do I want to pay double the price for just this short list of features that the 6500 doesn't have? In the end, obviously, I decided no, I wanted to save money and get the 6500. So now that I've talked about why I chose the Sony a6500, let's talk about some of the issues that people have with this camera. So I'm going to be talking about these one by one, and I should point out that before I actually purchased my 6500, I rented it for a week, so that way I could get a really good feel of the camera, see if I liked how it handled. So the first issue that people have is the battery life. The solution, obviously, is to get more batteries. And I should point out that while on our road trip, not one day did I actually have to put a second battery in the camera. Every time we were out shooting, I would just turn the camera off when I wasn't using it, and by doing that method, there was only one day that I actually got down to a low level of battery in the camera. The second issue people have is the IBIS in this camera, and a lot of people will argue online that either you don't need IBIS in a camera, or the image stabilization in the 6500 is terrible and basically makes it completely useless. Coming from my Nikon D5200, I was tired of every video I shot being incredibly shaky. I'm not talking about when you're walking the camera going up and down and getting that kind of movement in the camera. I'm talking about in just holding the camera and putting it side by side, you get that little tremor in the hand. That is what IBIS is supposed to fix. It's supposed to take away that little tremor from your hands that you get from when you shoot handheld. So I'm sorry, but I just disagree with the people online that say that the IBIS in the 6500 is terrible, because I found it completely useful for me. The third issue that people have with this camera and the 6400 is that all of these cameras have a rolling shutter, and what that means is that when you take the camera and you move it from side to side, you get a terrible warping of the subjects. But it wasn't an issue for me because very rarely do I do any kind of footage where I move the camera from side to side to get the shot. The other issue that people have, and this was really an issue when they released the 6600 without upgraded video specs, is that these cameras do not offer 4K and a 60 frames per second option with 10-bit color. I don't understand all of the specs when people talk about this, but my understanding is that there are cameras out there that basically have improved video features over the 6500 and the 6400. But frankly, the video out of this camera is such an upgrade from what I would get from a D5200 that I have no complaints. The next and last issue that I'm going to mention, and this is actually probably the one issue that I actually did run into a problem with, is the dimming of the screen. The screen on the back of the camera, when you are shooting in 4K, dims to allow for the camera to not overheat or waste too much power. If you're shooting outdoors in the bright sun, you can't really see the screen very well. My solution for this when we were on the road trip was whenever I was outside in sunny weather trying to shoot in 4K, I would put the viewfinder up to my eye and would use that to dial in the settings to make sure that all the brightness and all the colors look good, and then I would just hold the camera out. So in the end, it was something that you had to get used to, but it wasn't something that was an absolute deal breaker for me where I didn't want to purchase the camera. So now I think I've covered everything I wanted to cover between this video and the last video. Steven, I hope you make a video soon, and I will talk to you later.